All righty.
I didn't get that.
All righty. Welcome, Katie. She is the Director of the Policy and Education of the Coalition Against Hunger. The Coalition Against Hunger strives to build a community where all people have the food they need to lead healthy lives. The coalition connects people with food assistance programs, nutrition education, provides resources to a network of food pantry, and educates the public and policymakers on responsible solutions to prevent people from going hungry. So considering the upcoming changes with the SNAP emergency allotment ending, we wanted to provide our network with context about what SNAP recipients might be experiencing at the end of this month. In this SNAP 101 presentation, Katie will cover what SNAP is, basic rules to qualify, benefit amounts, rules for special populations, and addressing myths and stigma. You will leave with an increased knowledge of basic SNAP policy and learn more about the upcoming changes to the program that will lower benefits for family. So Katie, I'll allow you to introduce yourself and get started.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Katie Milholin, and I am the Director of Policy and Education at the Greater Philadelphia Coalition Against Hunger. I'm so thrilled that you were all able to join me today for SNAP 101, Understanding the Basics and Upcoming Changes. Although for my first slide, I'm going to pass it back to Camille.
Yes, of course. So thank you so much, Katie. So as we mentioned, this is really just a webinar to give you guys a really basic understanding of SNAP. And we recognize that many people might be here are SNAP Ed educators. So I just want to reiterate that this is for you guys to have context and knowledge for yourself for SNAP. And that it is not allowable in SNAP Ed for us to do outreach activities. There's specific outreach partners for that. So just keep in mind that when we're watching this presentation, that it's really just for you to have knowledge and context and not for you actually to inform SNAP Ed recipients. And if there were to be any SNAP Ed recipients that would ask you questions about SNAP specifically, it is best to point them in the direction to their outreach partners, and they can help them apply or answer any questions about eligibility. And then there's this really great link here that allows, that has all the SNAP Ed all the SNAP outreach partners for Pennsylvania, and I can pop that link in the chat so you guys can have that in case you're wondering on who your outreach partner is.
Excellent. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is just talk a little bit about what SNAP is. So SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, although it's commonly referred to as SNAP. And it's actually the program that was formerly called food stamps. So it's the same program, it's just now called SNAP. And it is a federally funded monthly nutrition program. And SNAP provides people with money to purchase food items at grocery stores, participating farmers markets, and participating corner stores. SNAP deposits money onto an access card, which is similar to a debit card. So I have an access card, a picture of a Pennsylvania access card on the screen, and it really does function very similar to a debit card. You would swipe that card when you're checking out or completing your transaction. You would have a PIN number for your access card, just like you would a debit card. Really, the difference between an access card and a debit card is that the access card funds are going to be restricted to food items only. So with your SNAP dollars, you're going to be able to purchase things like meat, cheese, fruits, vegetables, but you're not going to be able to purchase other household items that are non-food items, even though those items might be sold at the grocery store also. So you're not going to be able to purchase things like paper towels, toilet paper, household cleaners. It's really going to be restricted to food items only. And then the benefit range for a single person is going to be anywhere from $23 to $281 a month. Now, we're going to talk about how benefit amount is determined later in the presentation, but that's just sort of a quick overview. And then just so you can understand, of course, that maximum benefit amount is going to go up the larger your household size is. So SNAP is such an important program, mostly because of the size of the program, the number of people that it serves. It really is the nation's first line of defense against hunger. And as you can see on the screen here, for every one meal a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9. Now, the point of this graphic is not at all to put down the charitable food sector or to imply that food banks are not important. That is not the case. Food banks and the charitable food sector are so incredibly important. But this really just is here to show you how important, how large, and how impactful SNAP is as a program to fight food insecurity. In Pennsylvania, it supports about 1.9 million people. So who can get SNAP? It's really important to clarify because there are a lot of myths out there about who can get SNAP and who can't get SNAP. So it's really important to clarify that the reality is almost anyone with low income can get SNAP. And this is going to include families with children, seniors and persons with disabilities, unemployed and low-wage individuals, some college students, more with COVID rules, which of course I will cover, and then certain immigrants. When we're talking about SNAP, there are a few basic rules that it's important to cover and understand. The basic rules of qualifying for the program are going to include household size, gross income before taxes, allowable deductions, and then in addition to those 3, there are special groups who are going to have some additional rules, and that's going to be seniors and individuals with disabilities, college students, and immigrants. And we're going to break this down. We're going to go through all of these things. So the first thing to determine when someone is considering applying for SNAP is their household size. You apply for SNAP with your household, but there is a special definition of what a SNAP household is. The basic definition is people who live together and buy and prepare meals together. So in order to be a SNAP household, both halves of that definition would need to be true. So both live together and purchase and prepare meals together. So this is going to include families, married couples, and other people who have similar household circumstances. What this means, though, is that a person living with others who buys and prepares meals separately would actually be able to apply as their own household because they don't satisfy both halves of that definition. While they might live with others, they do not purchase and prepare meals with others. They handle the purchasing and preparation of meals on their own. So they would be able to apply as their own household, even though they live with others. This is typically going to be the case for roommates, renters, and friends who might live with others but handle their food separately. And then finally, we don't always think of a single person as being a household, but a person living alone who buys and prepares meals, such as a senior living alone or a single individual, would be a household of one. Now, within the program, there are some people that we would call mandatory household members, people who have to apply together if they are living together in the same household, regardless of how food is being purchased or prepared. So one of these people is going to be spouses. If spouses are living together in the same household, they have to apply for SNAP together, regardless of how they're handling food. Other mandatory household members are going to be children under the age of 22 years old. If a child under 22 is living with their parents, again, regardless of how food is being handled, they would have to apply in the same SNAP household as their parents. And this is going to include biological children, but also adopted and stepchildren. And this may include multiple generations. So if a 21-year-old is living with their parents, they would have to apply in the same SNAP household as their parents. But if that 21-year-old themselves has a child, that 21-year-old would have to apply with their child and have to apply with their parents. So all 3 generations would actually be wrapped up in a single SNAP household. And then finally, others under 18 years of age who are living under what's called parental supervision. So this might include cousins, nieces, nephews who are living with family members who are providing parental supervision, would again have to apply in the same SNAP household as those family members, regardless of how food is being handled. So I have an example here just to get you thinking about the rules of this program. So as I read this off, think about this in your mind. I'll give you a few seconds to consider the example, and then I'll go through the answer. So Sandy and Mike, both age 20, are married. They are attending college and staying with Mike's parents until they can save enough money for a house. Mike and Sandy buy and prepare their meals separately from Mike's parents. They want to apply for SNAP. So the questions are, how many people are in the SNAP household? Can Mike and Sandy be a separate household? And why or why not? So I'll give you all a few seconds to think through this example. All right, so the answer is that there would be 4 people in the SNAP household. Mike and Sandy cannot be a separate household. So Mike and Sandy would have to apply together because they are married and they are mandatory household members. But Mike would have to apply with his parents because Mike is under the age of 22 and living with his parents. So through those 2 mandatory household member rules, it would mean that the full SNAP household would be 4 people: Mike, Sandy, and both of Mike's parents. So again, Mike and Sandy cannot be a separate household because Mike is under the age of 22 and living with his parents. So the next thing to talk about are the SNAP income guidelines. Now, these are so important because SNAP is primarily an income-based program. So you can see I have on the screen the SNAP income guidelines that vary by household size. So it depends on how large your household is, how much money you can make every month before taxes and still qualify for the program. But the general rule is that the income limit is 200% of the federal poverty income guidelines for all households. And in Pennsylvania, there is no asset test. So how much money someone has in the bank is not going to affect whether they are eligible for SNAP or not. Now, these income guidelines that I have on the screen are effective October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. The SNAP income guidelines are updated every October 1st to account for inflation. And at the Coalition Against Hunger, we do a lot of public communications when those new income guidelines are released. So come October 1st, if you're wondering what the updated income guidelines are, please always feel free to check in with us at the Coalition Against Hunger, and we'll definitely have public communications about that change. So every year on October 1st, these are updated, and income is really the primary indicator of whether someone is going to be eligible for the program or not. Because income is so important, it is good to have a general understanding of what income counts. When we talk about income for the program, we're actually talking about both earned income and unearned income. So earned income is going to be things like wages from work, wages from self-employment, AmeriCorps Vista income in certain situations, and rental income. But it's also going to include unearned income like retirement benefits, Social Security and disability benefits, pensions and retirement plans, supplemental security income, VA disability benefits, and child support. So all of that is going to go towards those income guidelines, both earned income and unearned income. But not all income counts. So a few things very quickly that aren't going to count as income for SNAP purposes are going to be tax refunds, including things like stimulus payments. Educational assistance like grants and scholarship is not going to count as income. Work-study income, AmeriCorps income, AmeriCorps Vista income, again, in certain situations. income in kind. So for example, if someone is getting free rent in exchange for odd jobs, that is not going to count as income for the program. And then finally, vendor payments. So this would mean if someone else pays a bill for you, that also would not count as income. Now, once someone figures out their monthly income before taxes and determines if they qualify for SNAP based on, again, those income guidelines that I already shared, the next thing that's going to matter is deductions, which is basically how the program keeps track of the expenses that it allows you to report. Now, I'm going to cover this a little bit more later, but the reason that this is important is because SNAP benefit amount is based on your income and the expenses that the program allows you to report. So making sure that you accurately report both your income and expenses is going to be really key to ensure that you get the full benefit amount that you qualify for. Again, our goal at the Coalition Against Hunger is that everyone gets the benefit amount that they are eligible for. And so this is a really important way to do this. So certain deductions are, number one, there's going to be what's called the standard deduction. Now, the standard deduction is something that everyone gets, and that deduction amount is going to vary by household size. But the other deductions or expenses that households can report are going to depend on the household circumstance. So there's an earned income deduction. If the income that a household reports comes from earned income, then they would be able to claim that earned income deduction. Next is the child support deduction, although it's important to note that when we talk about the child support deduction, we are talking about court-ordered child support, not informal arrangements. Next, we have the dependent care deduction, which would include payments for child or adult care, cost of after-school activities and summer camp, and transportation to care. We also have the standard utility allowance, which is how households can report the utilities that they're paying for. And almost all households get the $681 standard utility allowance for utility expenses. So that is going to be standardized across most households. The excess shelter deduction, which is the deduction that people can report for high housing costs. And then finally, medical expenses. So only some people can report medical expenses: elderly individuals and individuals with disabilities. Those two groups of people are going to be able to report medical expenses over $35 a month. And again, the reason it's so important to think about what deductions might apply to someone is that accurately reporting deductions means that households will get the correct benefit amount. So as I said, in addition to those rules that I've already covered, there are going to be a few groups of people who have special rules within the program. And I'm going to go through these groups and these rules now. So the first group is going to be seniors and individuals with disabilities, but we do need to do a little bit of defining of terms so that we can understand what we're talking about. So for SNAP purposes, anytime we use the term elderly or senior, we are always talking within the program about a person who is 60 years old or older. Likewise, there is a specific definition for disability. In the SNAP program, it's going to mean a person who has been approved for disability benefits. Now, I understand that that definition absolutely does not encompass the full range of people who might be living with a disability, but that is what we mean when we talk about or use that term as far as the program goes. So for households where all members are elderly or have disabilities, and there is no earned income, those households can use a simplified application, which is referred to often as ESAP, or Elderly Simplified Application. So again, this is one of those cases where both parts of that definition do have to be satisfied. Number one, all members of the household do have to be elderly or disabled. And number two, there can be no earned income in the household. But if both of those things are true, then that household would be eligible to fill out a simplified application, which means basically that the process of applying for SNAP is going to be more simple for that household. And then also that there's going to be less paperwork for that household in order to stay connected to the program, which I'll cover a little bit more in a few slides. Again, as I just said, these households should be sure to keep track of medical expenses that are over $35 per month. And again, even though reporting these can require extra time, reporting these expenses may help to increase SNAP benefits, which is why I'm really hammering this point home. It's so important. The next group of people who are going to have special rules within the program are college students. So in addition to being income eligible, to having income under those income guidelines that I presented a few slides ago, college students are going to have additional rules that they would need to meet in order to qualify for the program. So some of these additional rules, and I'm going to read them off, it's important to note that only one of these additional rules would need to be met in order for a college student to qualify for SNAP, not all of them. So one of these things would have to be true. A college student would be eligible if they are caring for a child under the age of 6, or if they're caring for a child under the age of 12, if that student is a single parent in college full-time. If they are working 20 hours a week or more, if they are receiving work study, and this would mean that the student is actually working at a work study job, although any amount of work study hours would qualify for this exemption. If they have a medical barrier to employment, if they are under 18 or over the age of 50, if they are enrolled less than half time, or if they are qualified under one of a few very other smaller exemptions. In Pennsylvania, in addition to what I just read off, almost all community college students are eligible. So for community college students, there's a simple form that the school would need to fill out that would need to be submitted with the application, but almost all community college students would be eligible. And then finally, there are 2 additional exemptions that have been added due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So number one is that due to COVID, students who are work study eligible, even if they are not working in a work study position, would now be eligible for SNAP. And then the second one is students with an expected family contribution of $0 are now eligible for SNAP. So because of COVID, those 2 additional points have been opened up as ways that college students can be eligible for the program. And at the end, when I talk about the changes coming for SNAP, I'm going to talk about how long those 2 additional eligibility exemptions are going to be open for. And then finally, the last group of people who are going to have special rules within the program are non-citizens. So only certain non-citizens are going to be eligible for SNAP. And it gets a little confusing because some non-citizens have a 5-year waiting period, but others do not have that 5-year waiting period. So I'm going to break it down as simply as I can. It's really important to note that ineligible non-citizens may not get SNAP benefits for themselves, but they may apply for and get benefits on behalf of other eligible household members. So it's not an all or nothing situation. If some members of a household qualify for SNAP, the household can apply just for those eligible members, even if there are some members of the household who aren't eligible. SNAP will not subject immigrants to public charge. So that's a term that's been, really talked about in the past few years. It's important to know that SNAP will not subject immigrants to public charge. And then finally, that applying for SNAP is not going to interfere with a household's immigration status. So to break down something that's very complicated as simply as I possibly can, non-citizens that are eligible right away are going to be qualified immigrants. Often the term that we use is legal permanent resident or LPR. And most often this is going to be someone who has a green card, age 17 or younger. So legal permanent residents 17 or younger are going to be eligible for SNAP right away. Additionally, a non-citizen who is receiving disability benefits, or a refugee, an asylee, or another humanitarian immigrant is going to be eligible for SNAP right away. But as I already said, some non-citizens do have a 5-year waiting period. And that's going to be legal permanent residents. Again, typically these are going to be people who have a green card, who are 18 years or older and have had qualified status or had that, green card status or legal permanent resident status for less than 5 years. So again, legal permanent residents 18 or older are going to have that 5-year waiting period, whereas legal permanent residents 17 or younger are going to be eligible right away. And then finally, there are some non-citizens who are not going to be eligible at all. And these are going to include undocumented immigrants, non-qualified immigrants. So for example, DACA or asylum applicants. And then finally, visitors or tourists or people who are in the country temporarily. All right, we have our second example. So again, I'm going to give you some time to think about this before I explain the answer. So Mary has been living in the US continuously for 10 years. However, she did not have legal status until she received her green card 3 years ago. Mary has 2 children, ages 5 and 7, and she recently lost her job. So she wants to apply for SNAP for her family. So the 2 questions are, number 1, is Mary an eligible non-citizen? And then number 2, are her 2 children eligible for SNAP? All right, so you've all had a few moments to think about it. So the answer is going to be that Mary is unfortunately not eligible for SNAP. And that's because Mary is over 18. Mary is going to have that 5-year waiting period that I talked about, and she's only had her green card for 3 years. So in 2 years, Mary will become eligible for SNAP, but she's not eligible yet. However, Mary's 2 children, we can assume, are both US citizens because Mary has been in the country for 10 years. So as US citizens, Mary's 2 children would be eligible for SNAP. Mary can and should apply for benefits just for her children. Mary will not be eligible to receive benefits for herself, but she would be able to receive SNAP benefits for her children. This will not affect Mary's immigration status whatsoever. All right, so there are a few ways to apply for SNAP if after going through all of those rules and those rules for special populations, someone thinks that they qualify. The ways to apply for SNAP are number 1, in person at the local county assistance office, number 2, online, and then number 3, through a SNAP outreach partner. And I'm going to quickly walk you through all of those options. So number 1, at the local county assistance office in person, people are assigned to county assistance offices based on location. Now, Philadelphia actually does have a search feature where someone can look up what county assistance office they would be assigned to, again, based on location. And I have the link to that lookup feature. And then for people who live not in Philadelphia, just elsewhere in Pennsylvania, there is a list of statewide county assistance offices in Pennsylvania. Number 2, people can apply online through Compass, which is the state's benefits portal. And I do have that web address right there on the screen. It's compass.state.pa.us. And then finally, number 3, through SNAP outreach partners. So SNAP outreach partners are nonprofit agencies that partner with the state. And they do SNAP outreach, they explain benefits, and they assist with applications. Now, I know that this is a statewide audience, but my organization, the Greater Philadelphia Coalition Against Hunger, is a SNAP outreach partner in some of the counties in Pennsylvania, and I would be remiss not to give ourselves just a little plug. So for anyone in Philadelphia, Bucks, or Chester counties, those people can call the Coalition Against Hunger, again, my organization, at 215-430-0556. And we can help people to apply for SNAP over the phone, We can answer questions, we can help them with their recertification paperwork, and we can offer case management in certain situations. If something has gone wrong with someone's benefits, we will advocate on their behalf to fix whatever went wrong. But don't despair if you don't live in one of those counties, there is still a SNAP outreach partner that can help serve you. So there are SNAP outreach partners throughout the state, and I do have a list of statewide SNAP outreach partners on the screen. So again, if you are not in a location to be served by the Coalition Against Hunger, I promise you there is a SNAP outreach partner out there who will still be able to assist you. So something important to note is once we've sort of talked through what are the rules for SNAP, how does one apply? It is important just to note that staying connected to benefits requires paperwork. So it is not a one and done situation. Getting benefits would require someone to complete the application, again, using one of the methods that I just talked through. Number 2, to submit verification documents. There are certain verification documents that would need to be submitted. And then number 3, to complete an interview. An interview is something that is typically done over the phone, but can be done in person. Now, all 3 of those steps would need to be completed in order for someone to start receiving benefits. But in most cases, once someone starts receiving benefits, they are only certified to receive benefits for 6 months. They are not going to receive benefits indefinitely. 6 months from when that person initially applies, they would need to complete and return a 6-month semi-annual reporting form to the County Assistance Office on time. This is often called a SAR. It's not a very long document. It's not particularly difficult to fill out, but if the applicant does not fill it out and return it to the County Assistance Office on time, their benefits will be cut off. So it is really important to be aware of the SAR, to look out for it, and to absolutely fill it out and turn it back in once it is received by the applicant, which would be through the mail. This is going to be mailed to the SNAP applicant. So if that person completes their 6-month semi-annual reporting form on time, they are only going to be certified again for another 6 months. 6 months from when they do that SAR, they're going to be mailed a 1-year recertification, which they'll have to complete and submit on time. Now, the 1-year recertification is a little bit more complicated than the SAR, the 6-month SAR. The 1-year recertification is essentially like a new application. So in addition to completing that 1-year recertification, the person is going to need to submit verification documents and complete an interview. So for most households, there is going to be some paperwork that needs to be completed every 6 months. As I said, this paperwork is mailed to people, and it's really, really important to keep note of the fact that applicants are responsible for completing and turning in this paperwork on time, whether they receive it in the mail or not. So being aware of the SAR and the 1-year recertification is one way that participants can actively stay connected to their benefits, because of course we know there are issues with mail, or people live places where they can't reliably receive mail, or people might be experiencing houselessness. So it's important to know about these deadlines and to stay on top of them so that people can stay connected to their benefits. And then finally, how much SNAP do you get? So this is sort of the last part of the equation. So I have the maximum SNAP benefits on the screen, and as you can see, they do change based on your household size. These maximum SNAP benefits run from October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023. And like the income guidelines, the maximum benefit amounts are updated every October 1st to account for changes in the cost of living. Like with the income guidelines at the Coalition Against Hunger, we do a lot of public communication around this. So if you're wondering come October 1st what those new maximum benefit amounts are, you can check in with my organization and we'll definitely have information. So the way that benefit amount is determined is that SNAP adds up earned and unearned income, and then it applies the deductions that we already talked about to get someone's net income. Now, SNAP assumes that a household will spend 30% of its net income on food. The maximum SNAP benefit is supposed to be enough to eat on. So a person's SNAP benefit is going to be the difference between 30% of your net income and the maximum benefit allowed by the program. So again, this is why it's so important to make sure that accurate income and accurate deductions are reported to the county assistance office. But as you may have heard, there are these things being distributed right now called emergency allotments. So emergency allotments are extra SNAP payments that people get in the second half of the month to help with food costs during the pandemic. Anyone that does not receive the maximum SNAP benefit amount for their household size gets an emergency allotment in the second half of the month. This emergency allotment bumps them up to the maximum benefit. So for an example, if I am part of a family of 2 and I am receiving, based on that calculation I just talked through, I'm receiving $200 a month in SNAP. In the first half of the month, I'm going to receive my normal SNAP payment of $200. In the second half of the month, I'm going to receive an emergency allotment of $316, bumping me up to the maximum benefit amount for my household size of $516. Anyone who is already receiving the maximum SNAP benefit gets an emergency allotment in the second half of the month of $95, which is the minimum emergency allotment. And finally, if a household gets an emergency allotment of less than $95, it will be brought up to $95. So for example, if a family is $50 off of that maximum benefit amount, they would get the minimum emergency allotment of $95. Now, before I go into the changes that are coming to emergency allotments and the SNAP program in general, I do just want to talk through a few things, some myths that I often hear when I am talking to people about this program. So number one is that SNAP is not a capped program. So there is no limit to how many people can receive SNAP benefits. SNAP is considered an entitlement program, which means that anyone who meets all of the eligibility criteria can and should apply for and receive benefits. This is something that I hear often when I'm talking to people about SNAP. People will say, I don't want to apply because there are other people who need this more than I do. And that should not be a concern for prospective applicants. Someone receiving SNAP benefits has no bearing on if another person will receive them. There's no limit to how many people can receive benefits. Everyone who qualifies will get benefits. Number two is just looking at who benefits from SNAP in the state of Pennsylvania. So in Pennsylvania, almost 61% of SNAP participants are in families with children. More than 46% are in families with members who are older adults or disabled, and almost 46% are in working families. I bring this information to you just because often there are myths and stigmas perpetuated about who gets SNAP, who receives these benefits. And so I think it's important to look, what does the data say? Who is actually benefiting from this program in the state of Pennsylvania? And then finally, the last thing I want to talk about the program is the economic benefits of SNAP, because SNAP benefits the economy because of something called the multiplier effect. It is estimated that each $1 of SNAP generates between $1.50 and $1.80 of economic activity. In 2018, Pennsylvanians redeemed about $2.5 billion in SNAP benefits. What this means is that in 2019, SNAP added anywhere between $3.75 to $4.5 billion to Pennsylvania's economy. This is so important, that economic benefits of this program, the money that this program puts into Pennsylvania's economy. And then I do just want to highlight that SNAP benefits are accepted by almost 10,000 retailers throughout the state. So when we're talking about SNAP, we are not only talking about a program that puts food on the table for lots of families in Pennsylvania, but we are also talking about a program with significant economic impact. And then finally, just to take us through what are these changes that are coming to SNAP that I've been alluding to. The most important change to keep an eye out for is to know that these extra SNAP payments that I just talked about, officially called emergency allotments, are ending in February 2023. What this means is that starting in March, people will only be getting their regular SNAP payment loaded onto the EBT card in the first half of the month, and that there is going to be no second payment issued later in the month. This is happening because of federal legislation that was signed into law in late December of 2022. And at the Coalition Against Hunger, one of our biggest goals right now is just public communications, letting people know that this change is coming. We are specifically concerned because during the pandemic, a lot of people started receiving SNAP benefits for the first time. Our concern is that there are going to be some people who are participating in SNAP right now who don't know that this two-payment system, the way it's been operating throughout the pandemic, is not the way that SNAP benefits are typically distributed. So much of our work right now is really around public communications about this issue. Now, as we already covered in the beginning of the presentation, it is not your job as SNAP Ed educators to, talk to people about SNAP, but I am giving you guys a little bit of context and a little bit of insight into what we are telling people at the Coalition Against Hunger, how we are helping people prepare for this change. So we want to make sure that people report accurate information and changes to the Department of Human Services, the state agency that administers SNAP benefits. So there are some important changes that should be reported. Number one is address. As we already talked about, staying connected to SNAP benefits requires paperwork, and people may miss that paperwork or other important updates if the county assistance office doesn't have a current address. Number two is income. We talked about how important income is for that math equation of how much SNAP someone gets. If somebody lost work hours or had their pay cut, reporting that change to the Department of Human Services might make their SNAP benefit amount go up. Number two is we want to make sure that people are claiming all of the expenses that they're allowed to report. If someone's expenses have increased, reporting that increase might increase someone's SNAP benefit. And the goal is people are losing these emergency allotments. It's going to be a really big cut for families. And unfortunately, there is nothing we can do to reverse that change. We do, however, want to make sure that people are getting the full benefit amount that they are eligible for, and making sure that happens and means helping families report changes to the Department of Human Services. So expenses that count, as we already talked through: rent, mortgage, property taxes, childcare payments, care for older adults, and medical expenses for anyone with a disability or who is age 60 or older. Again, if expenses have increased, report that to the Department of Human Services so that we can make sure everyone is getting the full benefit amount that they are eligible for. We already talked about medical expenses, but I do just want to highlight that the expenses that someone can report, it's pretty permissible. It's a very broad category, and it includes healthcare premiums, prescriptions, co-pays, dentures, eyeglasses, paid or unpaid medical bills, and transportation to doctors' offices and pharmacies. The other thing to note is that if someone is already receiving the maximum SNAP benefit, reporting higher expenses won't increase SNAP benefits because, of course, that person is already receiving the maximum amount allowed by the program. So I do have some information about how someone can update their information. There is a customer service center that people can call. There is a mobile app that people can update their information through. There is an online portal. And then again, people can visit that local county assistance office to report changes in person. And then we also want to make sure that people know that you do not need to spend all of your SNAP. There is no need to spend all of the SNAP dollars given to you in the month that you receive them, because SNAP benefits actually carry over from month to month. All that is required is that someone keeps their EBT card active by using it at least once every 9 months. All you have to do is make one purchase of any amount every 9 months to keep that card active. As long as that card remains active, those benefits will stay on the card. And then finally, the other change coming to SNAP is related to the public health emergency. And this is going to affect those expanded college rules that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Those expanded college student rules are tied to the federal public health emergency, which the Biden administration has indicated is going to end on May 11th. This will affect several COVID-related flexibilities, including the expanded rules for college students. The expanded rules are going to continue for 30 days after the end of the public health emergency until June 10th. If students apply during this time, they would be considered still eligible under the expanded rules. After this date, student eligibility is going to be redetermined at the annual recertification, so that 1 year paperwork that people have to fill out, unless the eligibility change is reported at the SAR or at the 6-month paperwork. If the eligibility change is reported at that time, the Department of Human Services would have to act on it, but actual eligibility redetermination would take place at that 1 year mark. So while this is changing, this, unlike the change to emergency allotments, is not a change that's going to hit all college students at the same time. It's really going to depend on the timing of their paperwork. And just to make it really clear, that highlighted section, those are the additional rules that have been added due to COVID that will be going away once that federal public health emergency ends. And then finally, if you're interested in getting connected to my organization, the Coalition Against Hunger, you can sign up for our emails at www.hungercoalition.org. So at this point, I think I am going to stop sharing and we are going to open it up for any Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. We really appreciate all the information that you've provided. I know a lot of us have been in the SNAP Ed space and, it's connected to SNAP, but maybe not have had that much detail about how to actually qualify. So I know it's greatly appreciated that this information can be shared. So in the chat, there's been a few questions about if this will be recorded or if the slides will be sent out afterwards. So we are recording it. We will post it on our YouTube and our PennN channel. And Katie, I'm sure you're okay with us sending out the slides as well, if that's all right.
Absolutely, please do.
All right, great. So we will be able to get all these resources and all the great links that Katie provided. So one of the first questions was about your very first example that you had with the husband and wife college students living with their parents. So the question is, what if the income guidelines are met by the college student, but when the parent's income is added, they do not qualify? They would not be eligible for SNAP, even though they prepare and are responsible for their own food. Is this correct?
That is correct, unfortunately, because those college students are mandatory household members with the parents income then counts as they apply for SNAP. And if the parents' income pushes them over those income limits, unfortunately, they are not going to be eligible for the program.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying, Katie. So one person has asked, what is public charge? And I believe this was related to the slide that you had on more like immigration and the non-citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. So public charge is basically just a term that means someone who is primarily dependent on the government for subsistence. So this is something that has been talked about a lot in recent years because there was a push to change some of the public charge rules. At this point, public charge does not apply to SNAP. So if an immigrant applies for SNAP and receives SNAP, they will not be considered a public charge because they are receiving SNAP. And I do have on that slide where I discuss SNAP for non-citizens, I do have a flyer that breaks down this public charge thing a little bit more and might be helpful.
Awesome, great. So the next question is a little bit more about the college aspect of this. So you had mentioned that most community college students are eligible for SNAP, but if a student is at a private college and still meets the eligibility criteria, how might that person go about applying, and would they need to fill out one of those special forms that you mentioned?
Great question. So those special forms are only going to be for the community college students. A student who is attending a private college would be able to apply for and receive SNAP as long as, in addition to the income criteria, they also meet one of those other bullet points, one of those other eligibility criteria for college students. So again, they'd only have to meet one of those, but they would have to meet at least one of those. As long as they meet one of those additional eligibility criteria, they can apply for SNAP, and they would just want to make note of what exemption they fit under when they apply. So this can be one of the benefits of applying through a SNAP outreach partner. For example, the people at the Coalition Against Hunger, we help college students apply for SNAP all the time. So this can be a benefit of connecting with a SNAP outreach partner, talking to someone who has probably helped people in your specific situation apply in the past, and the SNAP outreach partner can help make sure that all of that paperwork is filled out correctly.
Great. All right. And then another question about reaching out to the outreach partners. So if somebody is non-English, is there an operator for that line that you provided? Or if so, is there another number that we can provide?
That's such a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. And what I'll say is I can only speak for us at the Coalition Against Hunger. I cannot speak for the other outreach partners because those are going to be independent organizations. But at the Coalition Against Hunger, we have both English and Spanish speaking staff who are ready to assist with applications. And then in addition to that, for any other language, we do utilize language lines. So if someone calls us, we can do that application in any language that they might need using a third-party translator through language line.
Great, thank you. And then one other question. So in regards to the SAR that they have to fill out, if they were to miss that deadline, would they have to reapply all over again, or what would the process be for them?
That is correct. So if they miss that paperwork, in general, their benefits are going to be cut off and they would need to reapply. Sometimes with the SAR, if you apply within 30 days, you can ask for a reconsideration, which could help your benefits to continue uninterrupted. But if you're not able to get that recertification, or if you're not in that window, you would need to reapply.
Thank you for clarifying. All righty. So those are most of the questions that we had that were kind of came up during the presentation. I believe that a lot of the questions that were asked during the registration process has been answered. But I do want to ask just a few more. So how often do these SNAP amounts actually change? And are the amounts pretty consistent other than this end of the emergency allotment and the college exemptions?
Yeah, great question. So the SNAP amounts in terms of like the maximum benefit amount that people get, those are updated every October 1st. And they're basically updated. It's not typically a huge change. They're updated sort of based on, current inflation and cost of living increases. The one exemption to that is that in 2021, the Thrifty Food Plan, which is the food plan that SNAP benefits are based on, was reevaluated. So there was a full reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan. And because the Thrifty Food Plan, which is what SNAP benefit amounts are based on, was reevaluated, in 2021, in addition to that typical cost of living increase, there was actually a pretty big bump to SNAP benefits of about 21%. That's not something that we would expect to see every year when we talk about that regular cost of living increase. That was sort of a one-time thing because of the reevaluation of the Thrifty Food Plan. But if you heard, a little while ago about a huge bump to SNAP benefits, that may have been what you were hearing about. But beyond that, every October 1st, and it is going to depend on, the current cost of living, but it's not typically a huge bump.
Great, thank you. And then there was just a few questions about kind of some targeted special populations that are more of interest maybe in Pennsylvania. So there's one question around, how is this change going to affect like rural SNAP participants, and then also any like low income Head Start families?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the change to emergency allotments, it is basically sort of going to be affecting all households in the same way. People have been getting different emergency allotment amounts. So the actual amount of SNAP that people lose is going to vary from household to household based on their household circumstances. But basically, this change is going to affect families in the same way. All families will be losing these emergency allotments. All families will be getting just that one payment in the first half of the month and no longer getting that second payment. That said, there definitely are variations based on specific circumstances in terms of how this is going to affect people. Rural participants who are not only dealing with the high cost of food, but of course also might rely on, driving far distances to get their food, are also going to be impacted by the high cost of fuel. So certainly, based on someone's individual experience, this is going to affect their life differently a little bit. Rural participants, I think transportation will be a big issue that we'll see, for low income families. I think, it's going to make it harder for families to put food on the table. I, talked through during the presentation some things that families can do to get the full benefit amount that they qualify for. But I do just want to acknowledge and make clear that this change is going to be really hard for so many Pennsylvania families. And unfortunately, there's not anything that we can do to fill the gap of emergency allotments going away. So we have tips and tricks that we hope families can use to get as much SNAP as they possibly can as they are eligible for. But I do just want to acknowledge that this is going to be a big and difficult change.
Thank you, Katie. And then the last thing that kind of came up pre-registration is just understanding how important it is, like how do we get our SNAP Ed clients understanding how important it is to be smart with shopping. And so I will do just like a little shameless plug for Penn here, whereas we actually had a really great webinar put on during our webinar series last year that talked about kind of expanding your budget and really shopping for like a low income budget. So if anybody is needing some assistance or getting some ideas of how to work with clients on, budgeting for their groceries because, maybe this new allotment, we have a really great webinar on our website that you guys could visit and other resources there too. So I'd like to be mindful of time because I know it's 2:00 and we like to keep this at an hour, but thank you so much, Katie, for this great information. I will make sure that this recording and the slides are sent out. You guys will all be getting a post-webinar survey, so we'd really appreciate any feedback or any questions or concerns or anything that you guys have. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here and joining the Penn webinar series. Thank
Thanks
you,
so
everyone.
much.